Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Robertson Jr., and this is episode 6 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. And of course, I have with me my co host, Mr. Jason Collins.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're all doing so well. Thank you for listening, doing whatever you're doing while you're listening to us, walking, running, making dinner, driving in the car. Not sure how many people are driving in the car right now.
They're driving in the car if they're going to their essential jobs or to go get groceries. Those are the two scenarios I'm going to predict right now.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. I am hanging in there. We're all doing our thing. Still working from home, so haven't left the house in quite a while. And in fact, I actually had a conversation with a coworker today where he went online to pay his electric bill with the city, and his bill was $0. And he was Skyping with me, and he was like, "Man, I guess they really are giving away free electricity. Hey, do you want to come charge your car?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm on my way." And then I was like, "Actually, no, I don't need to. I haven't plugged my car in a week. I haven't gone anywhere. Like, I've just been sitting here." So
Right.
it's an interesting lifestyle change.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange time right now. I keep telling Addison, my daughter, that we're living in a period that's going to be in the history books. Like, this is unprecedented. This is, unheard of what we're going through. Nothing that we've ever seen in our lifetime, and nothing anywhere close. It's crazy.
Right. Exactly. I can't really think of another, moment. I'm thinking about, for your and mine's life. I guess we were in high school when 9/11 happened. That's obviously, historical event, not going anywhere, cemented in the world's, history books. This is probably the next thing that, when we look back, hopefully when we're old, much longer, far away from now, we can remember these are going to be two moments we're definitely going to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to overcome it though. We're going to go to the other side, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
But again, why do we always do this? We open these podcasts up. These are supposed to be fun and enjoyable for people to listen to, and we go straight into the depressing stuff, talking about the state of the world, which is tragic right now.
Well, I mean, this is a horror podcast. Let's keep it in a dark tone. Why not?
Okay. Well, let's not get too serious. Nobody wants to hear that. They can read the news and watch the news if they want to get serious. So tonight, speaking of serious and really no fun at all, let's talk about tonight's movie, which is The Platform. This is a Spanish film. It's on Netflix. It was released on Netflix streaming March of this year, 2020, and it is different. That is for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. And it hit the ground running. I mean, it has got a very different premise. There's a very strong messages being conveyed to this. It's a deep film for sure, but it was very entertaining, and it was unique.
It was dark. It is, like you said, and we'll discuss a little bit about the message that the director, has gone on record stating that he was trying to achieve with this film. And it's not a secret. You watch this movie and you understand at least a little bit the ideas and the themes that he was trying to put into this film. But we'll get in that a little bit. This movie was directed by Jason. You want to take a crack at this name? Because I don't think I can say it.
No, I don't want to say it. I don't want to say this man's name.
So
between you and I don't want to say anybody from this entire film.
Right.
I mean, Gator. Let's just call him Gator. I like that. Gator needs his gag.
So this is a Spanish film, and this is by no means disrespecting any of these people. I just don't want to butcher their names by saying them incorrectly. So I apologize in advance. But this movie was directed by Galder Gaztelu-Urrutia. I'm going to just leave it alone. You guys can go look this up on IMDb if you want to. It was written by David Desola and Pedro Rivero? Rivera, yep. And cinematographer was John D. Dominguez. And the two main actors, I think, Jason, for me personally, I think that Goring and, is it his first cellmate,
Tremagasi.
Yes, those are the two main characters that I'm going with. I'm leaving it there, and I'm not going to try to pronounce their names. So again, guys, if you want to see the cast and crew of this film, you can go look it up.
I'd say Imagori was probably another strong character, or in this film. So I'd say there was three probably main characters. There was one additional character near the end that played a very strong role, a very big role, in the way it ended, for sure. But the majority of the film is Goreng, played by Ivan Masagu. How did you say it earlier?
I thought maybe it was Masegwe.
Masegwe? That sounds better.
Yeah, that almost sounds more French though, so I'm not sure.
I don't know. There was no bad actors though. It was a really, really great movie.
No, phenomenal acting, I thought.
Before we miss this opportunity, I do want to talk about how beautiful it was shot. I mean, it was a really gorgeous film.
Yeah, I thought that as well. I posted on my Facebook page to my my author Facebook page with my group there, where that I watched this movie because we were talking about preparing for this week's episode of the podcast, and I think I made the comment something along the lines of, this movie is gross, it's depressing, it is full of symbolism. However, it is one heck of an achievement in filmmaking. Like it is very well shot, edited, and acted. I mean, it's a beautiful film, which is a weird thing to say about a film that is so dark and so disturbing, but it is very, very well made.
Yeah, and from what I can tell, it was pretty. I would consider it a pretty low budget for a feature film, and they did a lot with what they had.
Yeah, we talked about. We'll get into that a little bit because I have some callbacks to last week's episode with Satanic Panic being kind of a B movie, splatter kind of thing. We'll talk about some of the visual effects in this as well. But again, this movie is called The Platform. It is a Spanish film from Spain, and it was just released on Netflix streaming in the U.S. in March of 2020. And this was a film that I think made the film festival circuit in 2019. It was in the Toronto International Film Festival. It won the People's Choice Award for the Midnight Madness session there. And that was at that film festival that Netflix actually bought the rights to stream it. So it definitely had some success. It also won some other awards in various other film festivals for some visual effects. The writer and director, I think, also took home some awards. So it was a very, very popular film in the film festival circuit, and it is now a very popular film on Netflix. Although it is one of those films that, and we've encountered this in several horror films, it's a bit of a divisive film where some people can watch it and they can enjoy it for what it is, and some people don't get through it. They start it and they either, they don't understand it, they don't like it, or it just grosses them out. There's various reasons why they quit. I've gotten responses on my Facebook page that some of them have tried to watch the movie and they say, nope, couldn't do it, too gross. I had one lady say, I watched it, but it wasn't great. It's not even memorable, which I thought was a strange thing to say.
I saw that on your page that she didn't even remember how it ended.
Yeah, which I thought was weird.
I thought that was odd because it was really, I don't know. I came into this movie with pretty high expectations, but I thought it was really great. Yeah. I really loved everything about the movie.
Well, it's been out for all of 20 days, 15 days. If you watched it and have already forgot the ending, I don't know. But it's interesting.
And it could have been just maybe she just wasn't paying attention. Maybe it was just doing something else maybe it was just noise in the background.
Right. Which is something else that we've talked about previously in several episodes where horror, which ties into my distaste of going to the theater to watch a horror film, and also really wanting to commit to horror films at home because they're so intimate and there's so many things that you just have to pay attention. This is not an action, not a comedy. Like I don't have a lot of patience for people that they put on a movie to watch it and they don't watch it. Like they'll put on a movie and they'll do 3 different things at the same time while it's on. Like, how do you enjoy a film that way? I don't know. I get if it's something you've already seen or if it's something that doesn't require constant attention, sports, stuff like that. But man, people that don't like, that will watch a movie, like people that watch movies with me and they're on their phone the whole time, drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. And
this was a film that I think you really should have paid attention to, because if you didn't, you really miss the point of the film. Like you said earlier, it was very symbolic. There was a lot of symbolism in this movie. There was a lot of really in your face messages. So I think if you weren't picking up on that throughout the movie, you really just weren't watching it at all.
Well, it's also subtitled, so if you weren't paying attention, you don't know what they're saying either. That's probably a pretty crucial part of this as well. There is a dubbed version you can watch, but I personally watched the original language with subtitles.
Yeah, I did too. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I don't know how people I cannot understand how people watch a dubbed movie. I have a hard time watching just the preview that it's done in. And Netflix, I think Netflix, or at least mine did, defaulted to the dubbed version, like the English dubbed. And I just was like, it actually turned me off the movie. I was like, I don't know if I can watch it like that. I wasn't even sure if it had the subtitled version until you told me. And
interesting.
You think you could get through a dubbed version?
I wouldn't want to. I would. I mean, I if it was a film that with like this one that was having a lot of success and had some accolades, I think I would try it. I would make myself get through it. I definitely wouldn't choose to. And it's interesting. On the Apple TV box, the Netflix app defaulted to the dub version. When I pulled it up on the web, it defaulted to the subtitle version on the Netflix app on the Apple TV. On the web, it defaulted to the dub version. So I don't know how they're making that choice. But anyway, I think one of the reasons I think that you have to watch it in its language of origin, which is the way it was intended to be shown, the Zori, gosh, I really wish I could pronounce these names. Tremazgisi, the first cellmate of the main character, his voice alone lends to his character. He's got such a gravelly, kind of creepy voice. It would have bummed me out to have that dubbed in a different person's voice. But anyway, let's see. Anything else I want to talk about? Oh, so we talked about this before we dive into the actual, film itself. There are some interesting facts about this movie. We talked about the symbolism, and again, the plot of this movie is essentially there is this prison that is in the shape of a tower. It's called the Hole. That's what the prisoners call it. Its actual name is the Vertical Self-Management Center. And it is basically a stone and iron prison that is, we later learned in the movie, 333 levels deep. So 333 cells stacked on top of each other. And there is a hole in the middle of every cell, which a platform drops once a day with food. And it starts at the top full of food, and the idea is the food has to get all the way down to the bottom for people to survive, and clearly it does not. So there is a very, very big theme here, and the director states that the film's key message is that humanity will have to move towards the fair distribution of wealth with an exploration of the importance of individual initiative in driving political change that critiques both capitalism and socialist systems. So that is the theme. It's very apparent if you watch this film. They don't even try to sugarcoat it or try to hide it. It's right there in your face. And the other, I guess, trick to this whole plot is that obviously the people that are on the upper levels get more food. They can eat as much as they want, and whatever's left over at the bottom is usually nothing. But every month you are reassigned to a different floor. So these cellmates, these prisoners, basically when they wake up at the beginning of a new 30 days, they don't know what floor they'll be on. They could be going up, they could be going down. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. So they have to learn how to survive at every level, and it obviously brings its challenges with every level. So it's a very interesting premise.
Yeah, and they talked about, so like you said, they have what we later learned, 333 levels, which they're making food for 666 people. Now, whether or not, because each level has two people in it, right?
Yes.
And so whether or not 666 had anything to do, like if that was a very intentional number that he came up with, but the fact that they were trying to make, they're supposed to be making food for 666 people to make it all the way down to level 333. The truth is, food never makes it really past close to 100.
Well, yeah, in the very beginning, our main character, his first level was 40 something, I think. And
48.
Yeah, and when the platform got to them, there was already very little left. I mean, the guy was shoveling just leftover rice in his mouth, and an apple was there. So yeah, it's really interesting, and you can dive into however which way you want to slice it, depending on what side of the camp you're on politically. That is not why we're here in this podcast, but
well, and it's important to note that he's not really favoriting one side or the other. I mean, he's really taking stabs at both. The very first line in this movie is probably one of the most important ones, and it's his cellmate. Shall we try it again?
Nope.
Tramagasi. His very first line was, "There are two types of people in the world." I'm gonna have to paraphrase, but two types of people in the world: people at the top, people at the bottom, and people that are falling. And that sums up the whole movie, right? I mean, it's like every single scene you're dealing with, either you're trying to communicate or trying to get through to the people at the top, or you're dealing with people on the bottom. And depending on who you are or your morals, will really dictate how you go forward, or how you survive that day or that month on that on that level. And so our main character, I'm going to say it, but our main character, he had a big heart, right? He had a bleeding heart. He wanted to distribute the food as much as he could, but his cellmate was on the very other opposite of that, and he'd also been there for a while. Maybe we should go into a little bit about why people are there too.
Well, yeah,
like I said, it's a prison.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second when we actually get into the actual film, because I have a couple more points I want to talk about beforehand about some of the making of the film before we dive into the actual movie. This, right from the get-go, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but right from the get-go, this movie did have it reminded me of The Cube, which is a very popular, it's an older science fiction horror film, which is another amazing horror film. I really, really enjoyed it. I hadn't actually seen it until a friend of mine recommended it to me, I think a couple years ago, and I saw it and I was like, yeah, it's really, really good. About a bunch of prisoners that are in a series of cubes that are interlocked, and they're all booby trapped in certain ways, and they have to figure out how to get out. This reminded me of that just because of the replicated cell structure, just the same thing over and over again, up and down, versus, in a cube shape. But the question that I had when I was watching it was, I wonder how many of these platforms they actually built for a set, because obviously they didn't build 333. The answer is 2. They actually built just 2 of the cells, one on top of each other, and then they used visual effects to, give the illusion of there being so many. So from a production standpoint alone, that was pretty cool to me. I'm just trying to imagine how many times they had to redress a scene or change it or modify it. Fortunately, because of the ways these cells were designed, there's not a lot there.
Really the only thing they may have to change was, like you said, there was a lot of gore in this movie, so probably just cleaning up a lot of blood.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I would like to see some actual behind the scenes of this. I was only able to read about it. I haven't seen any video yet. I don't know if it's out there or not. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting was this movie was actually originally written as a theatrical play, but it was never produced. The play was never produced, and I'm not exactly sure how the script ended up, or the stage play got the attention of anybody, but it did, and I guess it was bought, and then they had to do extensive rewrites to make it a screenplay by adding in a lot more action and a lot more physical elements, which apparently was a very torturous process. And the writers of the stage play had a lot of, I guess, qualms about some of the things that were being added, because they were trying really hard to kind of protect their artistic vision, which I guess if you look at this movie's theme and then you apply it to a theatrical stage play, I'm sure it is a lot more somber than this kind of like action-packed, gory film. So I could see that, but I think it translated really well. I mean, I have no idea what their original stage play, looked like, but I mean, it worked really well. They did a good job with whatever rewrites they did because I thought it really hit all the notes it was supposed to.
Yeah, I thought the film was great. I have a hard time even imagining it as a theatrical play.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would even work. The last one little thing I thought was really kind of interesting that makes a lot of sense. Although, again, we talked about this, I didn't actually notice it because he's a fairly thin guy to start with. This movie was shot chronologically. Like people that are in filmmaking, you know that a lot of times movies aren't filmed chronologically. They do whatever scene makes sense for production at that time, whatever schedule they're set on based on locations and whatnot. But this was shot chronologically because the main character, Goring, he lost about 26 pounds over the 6-week shoot.
No way. I did not notice that at all.
Yeah.
They probably should have fattened him up a little bit more before production.
Yeah. I don't remember him. Yeah. I don't remember seeing any substantial weight loss to his character, but it would make sense when you think about the fact that he's been in there for, months and months and is not eating a lot. And it makes a lot of sense. Kind of like Tom Hanks in Castaway.
True. I was just getting ready to say that their wardrobe was very baggy anyway. If they had shown more like a couple shots of him in the beginning, maybe cleaning himself up, and then closer to the end of him being much more frail, it may have been more apparent. Unfortunately, I don't think it was, so I don't think that really paid off.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't notice it, but there's a lot going on in this movie to not notice that one little subtle change. But I think that's the main notes I want to talk about in terms of the making of the film and kind of what went on behind it. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll actually dive into the film a little bit. All right, we're back. So the opening scene of this movie is very different from the look and feel of the majority of this film, with the food preparation and this ultra luxurious, high dollar kitchen, gourmet chefs running around. I thought it was a really cool way to open this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I mean, thinking back on it now, it would be what we consider the 1% of the world. I mean, these guys were these extravagant, trails of like oranges going down a loop, and this one guy is wandering around checking all the food. And while all of this is going, like this extravagant kitchen, there's a violinist playing inside the kitchen. It's like just silly shit like that.
Yeah, it reminded me of Downton Abbey a little bit, like the kitchen staff making all the food, to bring up to the wealthy people. And I mean, obviously the staff here was highly trained, chefs and whatnot. But it was a really like just beautiful presentation, and that was something that they really didn't have to show. Like it almost would have been interesting to me if the whole food was just a mystery. Like you obviously know this is a prison, somebody's making the food, and then this stuff just appeared every day. I don't think it would have. I love it in the film. I really liked it. I don't think it would have taken anything away from the film if you never actually saw where the food came from. I think the same principle would have been there.
I don't know. I disagree, since basically the message was it's coming from the top. It's coming from like everything that everybody else is getting is just leftovers that they've made. And I think you needed that juxtaposition of like this very highfalutin, fancy place where all the food's being made. This guy is like double, triple checking everything, and then it's going directly down into the depths where all these prisoners are. You have these warm, colorful tones, and then you get down in the prison and it's these muted blues, and I think I thought it was beautiful. I liked having the contrast.
I'm glad it was there. I definitely think that they should have kept the imagery of the platform full of the gourmet food and everything beautiful before it went down. Like, I think that has to be shown. I don't, I still, I think it's a great artistic touch. If I was writing it, I don't know if I would have thought to actually show the food preparation. I don't know if I would, maybe that's the way I'm looking at it. I don't know if I would have thought to actually spend screen time showing all that when it's such a small part of the film versus just, we know there's just this elegant gourmet food coming down. And it's so weird that they are putting so much effort into this food that is going down to these prisoners. Like, clearly they know they have to feed them and they want it to be nice and they're making nice food, but my God, you would think that they were serving the king and the queen every time they made these dishes. It was so interesting.
I think that was also part of the message, that nobody at the top, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what's going on in the hole. I don't think anybody up there has any idea what's actually happening in that, in that place. Just like the recruiter, she had no idea. She'd been working there for 25 years. In the last eight or 7 years, she's been actually putting people in the hole. She had no idea what was going on.
So you think that the people in the kitchen were they knew they were making food for X amount of people. They knew that they had to know that it was in some sort of prison or some sort of facility, but you don't think that they knew what life was like below and that the food wasn't making it? Like, you think they're clueless to all that?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Okay. And
which is part of the message at the end.
Correct. I was going to say that would fit perfectly in with the theme. Yeah, it was interesting. And again, from a visual standpoint, I really did love the juxtaposition of the color and the warmth of those kitchen scenes versus just the absolute garbage that's down below. It was really cool. Again, I don't know if I would have thought to put that in there though, because they go there a couple times. I mean, there's another like interlude where the main guy, the head chef or whoever he is getting furious with some of them because he found a hair in one of the foods. Like, and it's just so funny because he's freaking out about a hair, and down below they're spitting and pissing and everything else on the food as it's going down. And it's like, dude, just.
Well, I just think it lends itself well to the message being that these guys have no idea what they're making this food for. They're just in their own little bubble, in their own little world where everything's nice and pretty and warm. And, they're stressing over a hair while beneath their feet, people are literally killing each other to eat, right? Just to survive.
So you before we took our break, you mentioned, this being a prison, yet there were people there voluntarily. And this is the part that I don't think I ever actually understood in the movie. If it had been a straight up prison, I would have been fine. I don't understand what it was about this place that made people voluntarily go. Like, I know that because our main character, he went, obviously anybody that voluntarily goes has no idea what it's really like on the inside. It's almost like a ruse. But of course, like you said, the administration, the company that is in control of this, there's basically a recruiter. She's another character that comes in later in the film. She shows up for reasons of her own motivation, and she has no idea really how bad it actually was. So it was obviously a secret that was kept. I guess I still don't understand, from a regular civilian who is not being sent there as some sort of, debt to be paid to society, what is the mindset that you want to go isolate yourself for 90 days, 120 days? He went because apparently he was, now I don't know if this was a translation issue. They didn't know what words to use here, but the main character basically stated that he was going into isolation, into this prison, to give up smoking, to read a book, and in return, he was going to be given a diploma, an accredited diploma. That was the phrase they kept using. So it's almost like he was going to go to prison for 90 days and come out with a degree in what? Like, I don't understand that exactly. Mm-hmm. Whereas his cellmate was there for murder, a punishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it was 6 months. That was his stint. And I think that's what it was. It was the promise that, and this is why people would volunteer. It was the promise that people would get something in return. I don't think this was a prison. Even his cellmate, it was his choice, because, he had killed somebody accidentally, and they gave him the choice of either spending time in the psych ward or doing a year in this place. So, no, I don't think it's very obvious to people in the outside world what this place is, but I also don't think it's an outright prison either. I think the administration is running some sort of ruse, some sort of test to try to figure out something, but I don't know what. I also have I would, and maybe I'm just overthinking of it, but I would love to know what the universe here is. Like you said, why is this even a thing? Why do people even consider volunteering to go into this place? What do they think? What do they think it is? And what is life like outside of that place? Is it just like everyday life here?
I think it is. Yeah. Because you saw the kitchen staff. That looked very normal, looked very modern and elegant and everything. So yeah, it's like you got this amazing life on top and this dystopian nightmare that's underneath. But yeah, it's but in its own world though, like the first 10 levels, they're on cloud 9. They're like in that tube, in that hole themselves, right? Even if you're in like the first 20 or 30 levels, you're in a good spot. Like, you're happy, especially if you've been down lower before. Right.
So it's like, if you're going to be here for a while, you almost get jaded. There's top, like, they are living their best life up there. They're the first ones to get all that cake and food, and they don't have to fight for their life.
Right. And this movie it's funny because it's not funny, but they did a really good job of exploring greed in this movie, I think, with your top level people, because even the people that started out on top, so exploring the theme of this, the different levels of society that as we know it, basically were laid out in this hole. The people on top, like you said, that are in those first 10 levels, that when the food comes, they get it and there's plenty for everybody and they can have it all and they can enjoy it, and then they go to bed and wake up the next day and they eat again. If you've never been down below, you don't know how thankful you should be. The people that are on the bottom are suffering and they're miserable and they don't have any idea what anything good can be. And then when they get up, they have an appreciation. Like, it's one of those things where you don't know how good you have it until you lose it situation. Those people that are on top that think this is amazing, like, how lucky are you if you get put in this place and you wake up on level 1, 2, or 3, and then your next 60 days you're down on level 200. You have an appreciation. It's a very common thing you hear a lot about. These people that are born into wealth, they have no idea what it's like to want, no idea what it's like to not have something. So there's appreciation that can be lacking a lot of times. So they explore greed really well with this. The one thing we forgot to mention a little bit about the plot of this and how this works is it's not eat until you're full and then you send the platform on. The platform with the food stops for maybe 2 minutes at every...
I thought it was just 1 minute, but...
Yeah, at every level. So you have to eat quickly in order to, get what you need before it moves on. And one interesting twist that I thought was, again, really clever with the way that they made this just impossible to game the system was, if you try to keep food for later, if you try to store food to eat later, case in point, the first time it comes through or the second time it comes through with our main character, he takes an apple and says he'll eat it later. They punish you. The room either gets boiling hot or sub-zero freezing until you give the food back and you toss it down the hole. It's brutal. It is brutal, and people are going nuts and losing their mind. What I don't understand is why the people on top, and again, I guess it's just another look at society, potentially, if you've been on the bottom and you go to the top, why do you still eat like an animal when you know what is down below? And that's just, I guess, something else that is an individual thing that each person would have to answer for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And you hear about people doing that all the time, though. People that come from nothing and then they all of a sudden just hit their 10 minutes of fame, or they just, hit it rich, and then they just blow it on everything. And that was talked about near the end of the movie. When, after he made his decision on how he was going to I guess do his part. I think he realized that there was a bigger message that needed to happen in this whole. But near the end, they talked about. I think he was just reading the book, and honestly, the book itself has a lot of meaning to this movie. The book itself that he brought in, because everybody can bring in. By the way, before you're taken into the hole, and you don't get to. You don't get to take your clothes or anything, but you do get to take one thing with you. And he brought a book for some reason. But he's also an intellectual person, so him bringing a book makes sense.
Yeah.
But a lot of people can bring in anything they want: a rope, a knife, weapons. One person brought a dog. It's people can bring whatever they want. But and the book itself had a lot of meaning to the movie.
The book is Don Quixote.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of they talked about wealth. Like, the richest person is not somebody that has the most wealth. It's also not somebody that spends all of his wealth. It's the person that has the wealth and spends it well. Knows how to spend it. Mm-hmm. And that there was just a very deep meaning to that in this, because when you're at the top, you don't need to gorge yourself. You just get your ration and move on. If everybody just got their ration, the food would make it to the bottom, and the people in the lower levels wouldn't have to be killing each other and committing suicide and going crazy because they're starving to death.
Right, and that is where the horror of this film comes in. And I said this on my Facebook post after I watched the movie. I was wondering which camp I really wanted to slot this movie into. And we talked about this on one of our previous episodes, how many different sub-genres there are of horror. And I couldn't figure out if I wanted to put this one into horror or if I wanted to keep it into more of a psychological suspense thriller. And I've convinced myself that it is a horror movie. And if The Cube is considered a horror movie, I'm putting this movie as a horror movie as well, because it is horrific, the things that are happening, and everything that you just explained, leads in, like you said, people committing suicide and the violence. That is the crux of the story. That is where the majority of this film's action and plot points take place, is how these people are reacting and surviving, in this awful place. And it does lead to suicides that are graphic. It does lead to some, murders that are graphic. There's fighting, there's some nasty, just rude and defiling acts that are taking place amongst each other. And it just all keeps posing the question, why are we doing this to each other? Why are we doing this to ourselves? And that is the majority of the movie. So, we don't need to dive in to all that, because obviously people listening can watch the film for themselves and see that. But it was just so in your face, all of it. They really didn't hide any of the violence or any of the, the nastiness of this movie, which I thought was really, really good. And the director, again, has a quote about that from an interview that I saw when he was asked about the violence. He basically referred back to, again, this was an exploration of the importance of individual initiative and what kind of change they can make. And we see that with the recruiter, who we mentioned as a character. So there is a point midway through the movie where the initial recruiter, who brings in our main character, decides to go involuntarily herself for her own reasons, which we won't spoil tremendously here. But she comes in thinking that she's going to do some good. She is going to be the force of change and drive the initiative for these people to to learn from their mistakes and to be better, and everybody's going to help each other. And she learns very quickly that the gentle suggestion of change does not work for most people. And again, I think that is just so honest with the way we see society working today as well.
Right. Diplomacy doesn't work here. And the biggest reason is people you talked about there, you mentioned that the majority of this movie is the graphicness of people killing themselves, people starving, people killing other people. I think the main reason for that is the majority of the levels are left to do that, because out of 333 levels, only the first 75 or 100 levels are getting fed. There's a great deal of this whole that people are suffering. And, I think that lends itself well to society as well. And there was another thing that happened where the roommate, he, again, not trying to spoil anything too big, but the roommate at one point finds himself doing something horrific to the main character because of the situation that he's in. They're no longer on one of the top levels. They're on one of the lower levels, and he is having to adapt. And the one statement he made was, "It's not my fault. It's the people above that are making me do this. Like it's the situation that we're in.
Right.
Don't blame me, blame them."
Right.
And that whole victim mentality too. That was another just dig at so many people that are just blaming the situation and not taking accountability for their own actions.
Right. And you mentioned when I was talking about the not diving into which side of the political camp you are in when you watch this film and how you interpret it, both sides are shown, I think, very well or very equally. And there's a point in the beginning when the two cellmates are meeting themselves for the first time, and the cellmate who does end up committing this very graphic act toward our main character once things get desperate. Before that, even though these guys are friends, they strike up a friendship. They start getting along very well in these first 30 days together. They like each other. He says something to him, and he says something along the lines of, I think you actually said it, you have a big heart or something like that. You have a big heart, and he says, people like you don't do well in here, or you're not going to last long in here, or whatever. And again, it's one of those things that's so sad when you think about it, that it's almost like encouraging you to be graphic, to be bold and mean, to have to be this survivalist, me before you, in order to survive. That's not a good message that we want to accept. But unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people see themselves when it gets down and dirty. If it's me or you, I'm picking me every time, kind of thing. And I think it was a really good way that they showed that with the dynamic of those two characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there was also, the final big message they were giving here was that everybody that was working for the administration, the recruiters, the people that are cooking the food, none of them really have any idea what's going on. And the administration, they have some very clear and cut rules about certain things. No kids under 16 being allowed into the hole. And that was one of the things that they kind of hammered in, and then come to find out, that's not exactly true. So it's a lot about just, again, not trusting the administration, not trusting the whole organization, the whole foundation that this entire prison, this entire hole is built on, and all of its rules and what it's trying to do. You start seeing little cracks in it, and it all just starts to seem like bullshit. But
I think it was, because obviously somebody knew what was happening, and to know what was going on and to continue to do it, they have to be a sociopath to some regard. Some sort of, maybe they're justifying it in the name of some sort of scientific experiment or sociological experiment, but at the end of the day, they're sociopaths because they are very much aware that people are dying. In fact, we learn much later when our main character and another really actually good character come together to do this kind of heroic act near the end, they discover that there are several floors where there's nobody alive. They have all died, and the platform, or whoever is controlling the platform, is aware of this and doesn't even stop. It just keeps on going if it knows that there's no living human beings on that floor.
Well,
So,
obviously somebody's watching because they know when somebody's kept food, you
right.
know. Yeah, everything's being monitored. Somebody's watching all this horrific shit happen.
Yep. And once a month they have to clean up.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. You talked about this being, either a horror or a psychological thriller, but I think probably what makes this movie so scary is because it honestly makes you look at yourself and it makes it look at society. And that's the part that makes it a horror, because it's not these jump scares, it's not the gore that makes it a horror. It's really just human, being human.
yeah.
And knowing that there's so many flaws in our society.
Mm-hmm. This movie, it does a lot of things. As I don't know that I really expected. I don't know what I expected, considering I obviously understood what this movie was trying to do to a certain degree. I feel like this has been a very deep podcast that we've been talking, diving into the psyche of this film a little differently than we've talked about our previous films so far. But I think it's just because of the way this movie is, what it puts in front of your face. And yeah, it just does so many things. It is a horror movie. I know it is, because it's got the gore and it's got the death and it's got the violence, but it's also got the psychological horror, like you said, where you're exploring the horrific nature of just being a human. There's all these things that make this movie terrifying without being in your face terrifying. And that, to me, those are the types of movies that I really, really like. This is a movie that is difficult to watch at times. I mean, it's one of those movies where I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. I'd like to talk about it. I'd recommend it to people. I don't know that I'd really want to go watch it again, anytime soon. There's moments where it was just kind of very dark and depressing, and coming from me, that's pretty bad, because I like a lot of the darker fiction. But this movie just had an edge to it that was gross at times, like watching these people stuff these food leftovers in their face that are just, it's got moments that are kind of cringeworthy that make you just really they kind of sucker punch you a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to be able to watch like horror and gore, but this was not that. Those weren't the parts that were hard to watch. It was just the overall the premise of the film. And once you know what's going on and still seeing people act the way they do, that's what made it difficult to watch. It's like watching raw nature, wildlife.
Yeah.
You don't get to see that very often.
Nope.
But when you do see it, you understand that there is this dark side of nature that has to happen. And there is a dark side to our society, whether we want to see it or not. And this movie did not shy away. It put it right in our face.
And it did it in a really, like we said in the beginning, it was a really well presented film. It was beautifully shot and edited. I really liked some of the stuff they did with the red, tint, the red color when it was nighttime. That they did some really cool stuff with some of those scenes. The violence was well done. I mean, it was a well made film. There was nothing cheesy about this movie. It was very dark. It was very convincing. Just really interesting overall. I don't know that, and we're not going to spoil anything because this is a movie I don't want to really spoil. I don't know that I fully understand the ending. I thought I did with what they were initially setting out to do. The two heroes that we kind of have, the way that the end did culminate, I'm not sure I fully understand what the message was. Did you, by chance?
I think so. I think it had to do with, again, trying not to spoil it, but I think it had to do with letting the top know that the people that they were working for were not the people that they thought.
Interesting. Okay. So the message being sent was a message to the kitchen, not a message to the administration. Almost
No,
like
I
an
don't
alert.
think so. The administration obviously knows what's going on.
Got it. I was thinking more it was going to be more of a message of defiance, like we can beat your game. We have the ability to overcome you when we really try.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I thought that was the point of the their initial message they were going to send. I thought that clicked in my head. Like if we can get this back, we can show them that we don't need all this. We can do this. That's where I got a little confused at the end, but I liked the way it ended. I liked the end for our main character. I liked the way that he was sent, off to his culmination of his story. But I would have loved to have seen what happened when the platform got back to the top. Honestly, I mean, I'm a big fan of open endings, and stuff like that. I don't need to see it. I have an imagination. I see that a lot in literature, but I would have loved to just seen what happened in the aftermath of that. If anything changed, or if it was all for nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'll probably end it with two things. I thought the main character's his character arc was beautiful. I loved the way it tied up. Like you said, you loved the way it ended. I love the way that I love the end of his story. It was really great. The second thing is, that platform, I think, was moving way too fast for her to be laying on that. I don't think that platform was moving at the end of the night.
I thought the same thing when they were initially going down. They were gonna go back up with the dish.
The first message.
Yeah, I was like, there's no way they're staying on this thing. Like, I mean, I don't know how unless it's moving, the inertia is just so much that you can't move. It just presses you, down with it. Because I was thinking
he'd be a pancake. They showed that thing. That thing would.
Yeah, supersonic speed.
It's supersonic. Exactly. That thing was moving so fast at the end. Yeah. I never, it's just one of those weird things, and movies do this all the time. But I have no understanding of how that thing was moving in the first place.
Yeah, that was a marvel of physics for sure.
Yeah,
there was some science behind that. We can wrap this up now because we have basically done nothing except talk about how horrible society is for about 50 minutes now. But it was a really good film. It is a film that is hard to watch, and we talked about Hereditary having moments that were dark and hard to watch a couple episodes ago. This is a different kind of hard to watch. This is a very, just like you said, raw, in-your-face exploration of human nature that can invoke a lot of different emotions in you. It can invoke guilt. It can invoke, just things that you don't want to look at. This movie just holds the mirror up to the entire world and says, "Hey, look what's going on." It's a very artistic horror film, and I don't know that you see a ton of that. So bravo for Netflix, honestly, for seeing the potential of this movie and picking it up, at the film festival. Again, we've talked about this. I'm not sure we've talked about this on the podcast. We've talked about this several times over the years, how the streaming services have just shed light and opened up doors and given all these creators so much opportunity to get their work out there that, traditionally maybe would not have gotten seen by the masses because they weren't so commercially viable. So I think this is another really good example of that. I'm glad I got it. I'm glad I got to watch it. It was a good film. I don't know if it's one I'm going to run out and say, "Oh my gosh, you have to watch this movie." But if you're in the mood for something, more real and darker, and you have the stomach for it, I say you definitely check it out.
Yep, I agree. It was a really beautiful film. It was a very artistic horror. I love that. I love that synopsis. It was really well done. Do you have anything else to add?
No, except that now that we have had a very dark and depressing episode, again, exploring all of the flaws in humanity, we think we're going to be recording an episode that's going to be fun coming up. I don't know if it's going to be next week's episode or if it's going to be something in between next week's episode. I guess it depends on how much time you and I have. But I saw, and this is going back more to our horror roots of this podcast, I saw something going around on Instagram and social media at the end of last week. Of course, I follow a lot of horror-related sites and people and companies. It was a collage, a grid, so to speak, of 6 iconic horror movie characters / villains. And the premise basically said, you can only choose 3, or only 3 will survive. And it basically was saying, pick your top 3 horror movie villain characters. So my suggestion is you and I record an episode where we look at this grid of these characters and we each pick our top 3 and what the reasoning is behind that. And I cannot wait to have that discussion, because I have a pretty good idea at least who your number 1 is going to be. It might be my number 1 as well. I'm not sure, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. If you're a horror movie fan, feel free to play along at home, because I think it's just a really cool, easy idea to start a good conversation about horror movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like the premise that it's really open-ended. Your decision, it can be for any reason.
Right.
So let's just let all the universes merge and figure out who wins in our world.
Right. And again, I don't even know how to explore this yet. I mean, we may have to do it a couple different ways, or pick before we record. Is this just who is our favorite, or is this just who do we think would actually win out in these collision of horror universes to be the top dog?
I think it's probably who's going to win out. I think if all of these universes, in my mind, I want all of these universes to come together, that everybody is in it together now, and who is going to reign true.
You want the Super Smash Brothers of horror films.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's going to be fun, because there's a lot of different aspects. Every horror character and horror film have their own aspects in their own universe. And so thinking about how to merge these, and it's because some won't work in others. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I think we definitely need to get that recorded, because that'll be fun. It'll be a happier change of pace from this week's episode. So
this week's episode went deep and dark.
Yeah. You didn't talk about any demons this week, so there's that. But anyway,
I know. I disagree. I think we talked about like real life demons.
Ooh, here he goes, ladies and gentlemen, getting deep. Okay. All right. Well, anything else, Jason, before we sign off?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 6 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast. We have been discussing The Platform. Thank you so much for listening. And if you listen to us and you enjoy this podcast, please, if you have a few free moments, go leave a review, subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you prefer. We'd appreciate it. And until next week, take care.